What kind of man rides past a dying family in the desert and keeps going? That was the thought that cut through Caleb Rourke's mind in the moment he saw a small shape moving against the burning sand. At first, he thought it was a coyote nosing around something dead. But then the figure staggered into the open, tiny, shaking, and clutching a crooked stick as if it were a rifle. A little girl, barefoot, dust-covered, and terrified. She planted herself in front of a woman sprawled motionless on the ground. The sight hit Caleb with a force he didn't expect, stopping his horse before he even touched the reins. Lily Hart was only 4 years old, but the way she lifted that stick, hand trembling, jaw clenched, was the way Caleb had seen young soldiers brace themselves on their first night in battle. She yelled something hoarse and broken, a sound too dry to be a scream, but sharp enough to warn him away. Caleb kept his hands visible, palms up, trying not to let his own shock bleed into his voice. The desert had teeth, but it wasn't often it tried to bite through a child, and yet here she was, standing between her mother and death, as if she could hold the world together with the weight of her small body. Evelyn Hart lay half buried in heat and dust. Her lips were cracked, her hair matted with sweat, her breathing shallow, if it could even be called breathing. Caleb swung off his horse. One look told him she was walking a knife edge between life and whatever waited beyond. Fever radiated off her skin. Her ankle was swollen, bruised dark. A wound on her side pulsed with infection. He recognized it instantly, the kind of wound he had cleaned 100 times in war, though never this neglected, never this close to losing its fight. Lily jabbed the stick toward him again, not afraid for herself, afraid for Evelyn. Caleb knelt slowly, lowering himself until he was eye level with her. Dust rose around them in hot waves, the sun hammering down, the world shrinking to 3 breathing bodies, one of them barely. "Easy," he whispered, voice steady, controlled, the way he spoke to wounded soldiers slipping toward panic. "I'm here to help. I swear it." But Lily's eyes held no trust, only terror carved into something feral. Caleb realized then that nobody else had come. Nobody had stopped. Nobody had listened. She had been alone with her dying mother long enough to believe that no one alive meant kindness. When she struck him, the stick snapped. The sound startled her as much as it surprised him. She froze, staring at the broken piece in her hand, and in that moment, just a heartbeat. Her mask cracked. Her lip quivered. Her breath shook. And Caleb saw the child she truly was, buried under too much pain. He reached out, slowly, carefully, inch by inch. She didn't back away. She didn't approach either. She simply stood there, trembling, watching him as if he carried the final answer to everything that might happen next. "Let me help her," he said, voice low, rough with sincerity. It was the sincerity that did it. Lily broke. Not with tears, she was past the point of tears, but with a tiny nod. A nod that cost her more courage than most grown men would ever possess. Caleb moved fast then, because time was bleeding out of Evelyn with every shallow breath. He lifted her gently, feeling how light she was, how limp. Lily stayed close, gripping the stirrup as if the horse were her only anchor left in the world. Caleb mounted with Evelyn across his lap, pulled Lily up in front of him, and wrapped one arm around her to keep her steady. Her small hands clenched his coat, not for trust yet, but for survival. The 5-mile ride back to his ranch felt like 20. The desert stretched wide and silent, too silent as if holding its breath. Caleb kept scanning the horizon, tracks in the sand, vultures circling, movement behind distant rocks. Anything that might suggest the men who did this were still near. Lily didn't speak. but he could feel her body stiffen every time he shifted to look around. She knew danger better than any child should. By the time the ranch came into view, its lone cabin, weathered fence, and thin trail of smoke from last night's fire, Lily sagged against him, exhausted. Caleb slid off the horse, carried Evelyn inside, and laid her on his bed. The moment he touched her skin, he knew the fever was worse than he'd hoped. Her pulse fluttered weakly. Her breathing stuttered. Infection had already begun its climb. Caleb gathered water, herbs, clean cloth, and his old medic satchel. Lily hovered near the door, wide-eyed, unsure whether to enter or run. Her small hands curled into fists, as if bracing herself for the worst. Caleb caught her gaze, offered a nod. Not commanding, not coaxing, just steady reassurance. And she stepped inside. The work began. He washed the wound first, each touch gentle but firm, knowing pain was unavoidable, but letting every motion say, "I'm trying. I won't hurt her more than necessary." Evelyn twitched, murmured something lost in delirium. Lily scrambled to her side, whispering to her mother, trying to call her back from whatever darkness she wandered through. Hours passed like that. Caleb stitching flesh with careful precision. Lily pressing cool cloths on her mother's forehead. The cabin filled with the scent of herbs, sweat, fear, and determination. Night crawled in, silent except for Evelyn's ragged breaths and the steady rhythm of Caleb's movements. By dawn, she was still alive. Barely, but alive. Caleb exhaled for the first time since finding them. Lily slumped against the bed, her tiny body finally giving in to exhaustion. He covered her with a blanket, watching as she curled beside her mother, fingers entwined with Evelyn's hand, holding on as if her grip alone kept Evelyn tethered to the world. Outside, the desert cooled under the soft morning light. Inside, 3 lives. Strangers hours ago were now bound together by survival, by fear, and by a fragile hope that might not last the day. But for the moment, they had made it through the night. Evelyn's recovery did not happen in a straight line. It came in fragile fragments, moments of clarity followed by hours of fevered dreaming, breaths that steadied, then suddenly hitched again, the soft grip of her hand tightening in sleep, only to loosen minutes later. Caleb had nursed wounded men through worse. But something about watching Evelyn fight her way back left a tightness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. The desert had nearly taken her, and now each day felt like a borrowed miracle he had to guard with everything he had. Lily became his silent partner in that mission. She moved through the cabin like a small shadow, alert, listening to every sound, watching his every action. At first, she stayed close to her mother's side, unwilling to let Caleb take over completely. But over the next days, the fear in her eyes softened. She watched how carefully he checked Evelyn's bandages, how gently he cooled her forehead, how he whispered to her, even when she couldn't hear. Something in his steadiness reassured her in a way the world rarely had. Every morning began the same. Caleb brewed strong coffee for himself, warm broth for Lily, and a medicinal mix for Evelyn. Lily refused to eat unless he sat with her. She perched on the wooden chair with her legs tucked under her, clutching the bowl in both hands, blowing carefully on each steaming sip. Sometimes she glanced at him as if afraid he would vanish the moment she looked away. He knew that look well, the look of someone who had lost too much, too fast. On the 4th morning, Evelyn opened her eyes fully for the first time. Not half-glazed, not fever-blurred, fully awake. Caleb was changing her bandage when she whispered a rasped, "Where?" Lily shot upright so fast her bowl clattered. She climbed onto the bed, hands on her mother's cheeks, tears forming without falling. Evelyn tried to lift her hand, but winced in pain. Caleb laid a steadying palm against her arm. "You're safe," he said. "You're at my ranch. You've been here for several days. Evelyn studied him with an intensity he didn't expect. Her eyes, still fogged with weakness, held gratitude, fear, confusion, and something else. The dawning realization that her life had been saved by a stranger she didn't recall meeting. She tried to speak again, but words dissolved into hoarse breaths. Caleb poured water, lifting her gently so she could sip. "Thomas," she whispered. Lily's face fell. Caleb felt that quiet collapse like a blow. He shook his head slightly, meeting Evelyn's gaze with a calm honesty she deserved. "Lily told me what happened. I'm sorry." Evelyn closed her eyes, and a tremor traveled through her. Caleb stepped back to give her space, though his instinct urged him forward. He recognized this grief. He had worn it himself. For the next days, Evelyn's strength returned little by little. She learned to sit up with assistance. She learned to walk a few steps, leaning on Caleb's arm. She learned to breathe without pain. Every improvement made Lily's face light up. And Caleb found himself strangely grateful just to witness that small miracle each time it happened. But healing was not only physical. In the quiet evenings, when the desert air cooled and the sky turned violet, something subtle shifted between the three of them. Lily began talking more. Not all at once, but in fragments. She told Caleb about the flowers her father used to pick for her, about the lullaby Evelyn sang at night, about the journey they had taken, full of hopes she barely understood, but felt deeply. She spoke about Thomas with a solemn reverence, the way children do when trying to hold on to a memory already slipping away. Caleb listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct. He simply made room for her words. And each time she opened up, a new piece of her trust settled into place. Evelyn watched these moments quietly. At first from the bed, then from a chair near the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes followed Caleb's movements, the way he stirred the pot, sharpened a tool, fixed the hinge on the door, braided the horse's reins. There was something grounding, almost soothing, about the quiet competence he carried. A man who didn't fill silence with noise. A man who didn't ask for anything in return. One evening, as Caleb prepared a salve for her wound, Evelyn spoke softly. "You saved our lives." He didn't look up from the herbs he crushed, but she saw the slight pause in his hands. "Anyone would have done the same," he replied. "No," she said, voice firmer. "Not anyone." Caleb met her eyes then. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Two people who had lost more than they admitted, who had no reason to trust the world, but somehow trusted each other anyway. Lily had fallen asleep curled against her mother's side, the blanket rising and falling with their combined breaths. Caleb lowered his voice. "I'm just glad I found you in time." Evelyn swallowed hard. "I don't know why you'd go to such trouble for strangers." He hesitated. Then, for once, let the truth slip free. "You weren't strangers the moment I saw that girl trying to fight me off with a stick." Something in Evelyn's chest softened. The kind of softening that happens when fear loosens its grip. Over the next week, recovery became routine. Evelyn helped with small tasks. Folding cloth, stirring the stew, brushing the horse while resting on a stool. Lily followed Caleb like a small deputy, carrying water buckets half her size, handing him nails, announcing proudly whenever she completed a task. And slowly, the cabin began to feel less like Caleb's solitary refuge, and more like a home filled with voices. Soft ones, healing ones, but the peace was fragile, hanging by threads none of them could see. Beneath every shared meal, every quiet smile, every gentle moment of rebuilding, there lingered the weight of unspoken fears. The shadow of something still out there, nearing, preparing to break whatever hope they were stitching together. Caleb sensed it in the air, like the faint smell of rain before a storm. Evelyn sensed it too, in the way her thoughts drifted to the men who had killed her husband, and Lily felt it most of all. Waking some nights with a gasp, clinging to whoever's arms reached her first. For now they lived in a fragile peace. But fragile things rarely stayed whole for long in the West. The first sign of trouble wasn't a knock. It was dust. Thin, rising, distant. Caleb saw it from the corral while he was tightening the straps on his mare's saddle. A small cloud moving fast, pushed by hooves, not wind. He straightened slowly, instincts sharpening the way they had on battlefields years ago. Someone was coming. Someone with purpose. Inside the cabin, Evelyn and Lily were sorting dried herbs. Lily hummed under her breath, a fragile melody Evelyn had begun teaching her again, as if stitching the pieces of her childhood back together. When Caleb stepped inside, his face told Evelyn everything she needed to know. "What is it?" she whispered, already gathering Lily close. "Riders," Caleb said. "3 of them, moving quick." Evelyn's hand tightened around Lily's shoulder, but she forced her voice steady. "Is it them?" He didn't answer right away, which was an answer in itself. The riders arrived minutes later, pulling up in front of the cabin with too much confidence to be simple travelers. Dust settled around their boots as they dismounted. The tallest man stepping forward with the polished arrogance of someone used to being obeyed. His clothes were clean, too clean for frontier men. Dark coat, neat vest, silver-tipped boots. His eyes were sharp behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Grant Wycliffe. Caleb recognized the type immediately. A man who measured everything, money, land, people, by what advantage it could give him. "Mr. Rourke," Grant called out, voice smooth as oiled leather. "I believe you have something that belongs to the Hart family." Evelyn froze in the doorway. Lily pressed into her skirt, breath catching. Caleb stepped out first, closing the gap so Grant couldn't see inside the cabin. "I don't know you," Caleb said calmly. "State your business." "Oh, I think you do." Grant pulled a folded document from his coat, holding it like a weapon. "I represent the estate of Thomas Hart and his surviving family back east. We have reason to believe his daughter, Lily Hart, is currently in your possession." Caleb's jaw clenched. "She's not property." Grant's smile widened, cold and tight. "Everything is property in the eyes of the law." He slipped the paper open. "This is a temporary custody order signed by Judge Merritt of Copper Bend. Until matters of inheritance are settled, guardianship falls to the Hart family. Effective immediately." Evelyn rushed forward then, voice breaking. No, they don't want her. They want what's attached to her name." Grant raised a hand with infuriating calm. "Mrs. Hart, the estate left behind by your husband is substantial. Without clear documentation, custody must favor the family of origin. My husband is dead because his family turned their backs on him." She snapped, shaking. "They never even wrote him back." "Be that as it may," Grant replied, unmoved. "The law has spoken." Caleb stepped between them, shielding Evelyn and Lily with his body. "They're not going anywhere." Grant folded the document and tucked it back into his coat. "You're interfering in legal matters, Mr. Rourke. That won't end well. For any of you." There was no threat in his tone. Just certainty. Dangerous certainty. "We'll be back in 2 days," Grant added. "With the sheriff, and chains if necessary." The men remounted, riding off with the same cruel confidence they'd arrived with. The moment their figures shrank into the horizon, Evelyn collapsed onto the porch steps, trembling. Lily climbed into her lap, clinging desperately. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, breathing hard through anger he rarely let surface. He crouched in front of them. "You two listen to me," he said, voice low. "They're not taking her. I won't let that happen." Evelyn lifted her head, desperate but afraid to hope. "What can we do?" "They have the law," Then we don't wait for the law to come knocking, he said. We move. That night, the cabin filled with hurried motion. Caleb packed dried meat, water skins, blankets, ammunition, salves, and everything Evelyn needed to keep healing. Evelyn wrapped food and tucked Lily's spare clothes into a small satchel. Lily tried to help, but her hands shook too much. Caleb knelt beside her. "Hey," he said gently. "You remember how brave you were in the desert?" She nodded. "I'm going to need that bravery again. Can you do that for your mama?" Another nod, small but solid. Caleb saddled the horses under the moonlight. The desert stretched wide and silver, quiet except for their breaths. The plan was simple. Head north to a canyon he knew from his army days, a hidden place with water, shelter, and defensive ground. A place the Hart family wouldn't find easily. Evelyn climbed onto one horse with Lily in front of her. Caleb mounted the other. He looked back at his ranch, a place that had been a quiet refuge for years, suddenly transformed into a battleground. He hated leaving it. But he'd done it before. For war. For duty. Tonight, he left for something far more personal. They rode into darkness. The first hours were silent, except for hoofbeats. The desert at night was a different creature. Cooler, but watchful. Every sound felt louder, every shadow more alive. Lily kept looking back, making sure Caleb was still there. He always was. Evelyn broke the silence. "Caleb, why are you doing this? You don't owe us anything." He looked over, lit faintly by moonlight. "Owing has nothing to do with it." She didn't answer, but her eyes stayed on him longer than before. Eyes filled with fear, hope, and something warmer she hadn't let herself feel since Thomas died. By dawn, they reached the narrow entrance to the canyon. Red walls rose like sleeping giants on either side. Water trickled through a shaded basin, and tall stones formed natural blinds. A perfect hideout, inside the canyon, safe for the moment. Something inside Lily finally cracked. She burst into tears, loud, wrenching, terrified sobs she had held back for too long. Evelyn gathered her close, and Caleb paced outside, fists clenched, listening to the sound of a childhood breaking. When Lily finally calmed, Caleb returned to the fire pit he'd built. Evelyn looked at him across the flames, her voice low. "They're not going to stop, are they?" "No," he said, "but neither am I." Something shifted in that moment. Quiet but undeniable. He wasn't just protecting them. He was becoming theirs. And they were becoming his. But hidden in the canyon or not, Caleb knew the truth that the desert whispered around them. Running only bought time. Sooner or later, they would have to fight back. They waited 2 more days in the canyon before Caleb made his decision. Running had bought them time, but time was not the same as safety. Time didn't erase a custody order. Time didn't stop a man like Grant Wycliffe, someone who wielded the law like a whip and never swung it without a purpose. Caleb knew the canyon could hide them only so long. And the longer they stayed, the easier it would be for worry and fear to eat away at Evelyn and Lily until there was nothing left of the life they were trying to rebuild. He sat by the dying fire at dawn, watching the first hints of gold spill across the red stone walls, and he knew, if they wanted freedom, they had to stop running. They had to face the law head on. Evelyn woke slowly, her voice soft behind him. "You've been awake all night." He didn't turn at first, thinking. "That's never a good sign," she said, attempting a smile, though it flickered. She sat beside him, wrapping her shawl tighter. "You already made a decision." He nodded. "We're going to Red Rock." Her breath caught. "Caleb, Judge Merritt already signed the order." "We're not going to Merritt," he said. "We're going to Judge Franklin Hardin." Evelyn had heard of him. Everyone had. A rare kind of judge. The kind who didn't bend from the weight of gold or the whisper of threats. Hardin was a man who measured the truth, not the pockets behind it. "You think he'll listen?" she whispered, eyes searching his. "I think," Caleb answered, turning toward her, "that Hardin is the only chance we have of showing the truth before Grant buries us in lies." Evelyn looked toward Lily, still sleeping curled up on a blanket, her face peaceful for the first time in days. The idea of putting her in another courtroom made Evelyn's chest tighten. But she knew Caleb was right. They couldn't hide forever. And if they didn't act now, Grant Wycliffe would come back with the sheriff, guns, and the full weight of the law. So they rode at sunrise. The journey to Red Rock was tense, every mile heavy with the knowledge that they weren't just traveling to a town. They were traveling to a battle. Lily clung tightly to Evelyn, her small hands gripping the fabric of her mother's dress. Caleb rode beside them, silent, scanning the horizon for riders. But the road stayed empty. Red Rock appeared as a cluster of brick buildings tucked against a ridge, a small courthouse rising above the rest. They reached the center of town just as the sun crested the rooftops. The courthouse steps were cold stone beneath their boots, and Lily's hand slipped trembling into Caleb's as they climbed. Inside, the room was quiet, except for murmurs. A few townsfolk lingered from an earlier case. At the front, Judge Franklin Hardin sat behind the bench, gray hair swept neatly back, posture straight, eyes sharp as a blade. When his gaze lifted to them, he seemed to assess everything. Caleb's protective stance, Evelyn's pallor, Lily's fear, the dust on their boots, the urgency in their breath. Before Caleb could speak, a voice echoed across the room. "Your Honor, I object to this proceeding." Grant Wycliffe stood at the opposite side of the courtroom, flanked by two well-dressed men. His tone was confident, rehearsed, smug. "These people are fugitives. They fled with a minor after being served a lawful order." Judge Hardin raised a hand. The room obeyed. "Mr. Wycliffe," he said calmly, "this court decides what is lawful inside these walls, not you. Now stand aside." Grant stiffened, lips tightening, but obeyed. Hardin turned to Caleb. "Mr. Rourke, why did you bring these people to my court?" Caleb stepped forward. "Because they're telling the truth, and no one else will listen." The judge studied him, and then nodded once. "Proceed." Evelyn spoke first. Her voice trembled, but she didn't falter. She recounted the journey with Thomas, the attack in the desert, the agony of watching him die, the horror of being left for dead, the long hours lying beside her unconscious daughter. When tears finally spilled, Caleb placed a steadying hand on her back. Lily's testimony came last. Judge Hardin didn't call her forward. He stepped down from the bench and crouched to her level, a gentle but solemn act that silenced the room. Lily stood with her small hands clasped, eyes wide but brave. She spoke in soft, careful phrases. How her father was kind, how the men shot him, how her mother cried but tried to protect her, how Caleb found them, how he saved her mother's life, how he never hurt them. Hardin listened without a flicker of impatience. When she finished, Caleb felt Evelyn's hand slip into his. Grant Wycliffe's turn arrived like a knife grinding across glass. He stepped forward with the air of a man expecting victory. "Your Honor, this is all tragic, yes, but irrelevant. The Hart family simply wants custody until the estate is sorted. They have the legal right." "The legal right," Hardin repeated quietly. "Or the financial motivation?" Grant's jaw twitched. Hardin walked slowly back to the bench. "Mr. Wycliffe, explain to this court why the Hart family made no attempt to contact Thomas Hart during his marriage, yet suddenly wishes to claim his child only after learning of his unassigned inheritance." Grant opened his mouth, but no sound came. Hardin continued before he could recover. "Explain why Mrs. Hart's brother-in-law filed for custody before Thomas's body was even buried." The courtroom shifted. Someone swallowed hard. Grant tried again. Your Honor, the paperwork is— Paperwork, Hardin cut in, is what wicked men use when bullets fail. Silence. Then Hardin delivered the ruling. The custody order from Judge Merritt is hereby overturned. Full guardianship returns to the child's mother, Evelyn Hart. Any disputes regarding the estate must be presented to probate court, not forced upon a grieving widow through intimidation. A soft cry broke from Evelyn, half relief, half disbelief. Lily threw her arms around her mother's neck. Caleb exhaled slowly, shoulders sinking for the first time in days. Grant Wycliffe's face burned red with silent fury, but Hardin wasn't finished. And Mr. Wycliffe, the judge added, if you or the Hart family pursue this family through coercion again, you will answer to me directly. He struck the gavel once, sharp and final. The battle was over. But the moment the courtroom emptied, something unexpected happened. Evelyn turned to Caleb with trembling hands, eyes full of everything she hadn't dared to hope for. You saved us, she whispered. He shook his head. No, you saved yourself. But he never finished. Her hand touched his cheek, soft, grateful, certain. In the hallway, with sunlight streaming across his face and Lily nestled between them, Caleb realized something with startling clarity. He didn't just want to protect them, he wanted to belong to them. And for the first time in years, the possibility didn't terrify him. It felt like a beginning. The courthouse hallway still smelled of dust and old paper when Evelyn's hand slipped into Caleb's. Trembling but warm, as if her entire world had finally found something solid to hold on to. Lily stood between them, gripping each of their fingers with the fierce certainty only a child could possess. They had won, truly won. And yet the greatest change was not the gavel strike or the judge's ruling. It was the sudden, overwhelming realization that none of them wanted to walk out of that courthouse separately. Not now. Not ever. Caleb had never planned to speak the words that came next. They rose in his chest, faster than thought, faster than caution, born from the days he spent nursing Evelyn back to life. From the nights Lily cried herself to sleep against his shoulder, from every step he had taken to protect them. He turned to Evelyn, heart pounding like the hooves of a sprinting Mustang, and the nervous flash in her eyes told him she already sensed it. Evelyn, he said quietly, I don't want this to be the end of the fight. I want it to be the beginning of something real. Something for all of us. Evelyn's breath caught. Her fingers tightened around his, and for a moment he thought the emotion might swallow her whole. Then, with a steadiness that came not from certainty but from courage, she whispered, What are you asking me, Caleb? He didn't look away. Marry me, today, right now if you'll have me. Lily gasped, a small bright sound that echoed like a bell in the quiet hallway. Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth, tears gathering faster than she could blink them back. She had lost a husband, lost a home, nearly lost her life. She had every reason to hesitate. But instead she took a slow breath and let her hand fall from her lips, revealing a smile. Soft, aching, beautifully alive. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Caleb, I will. The wedding was simple. Exactly the kind of simple that felt right for three people who had survived more than most townsfolk would ever learn. Judge Hardin himself insisted on officiating, claiming it was the least he could do after witnessing what they'd endured. Pastor Williams and his wife were called in as witnesses. Lily stood proudly between Caleb and Evelyn, watching every word with bright, unblinking eyes, as if she feared missing a single second. When the vows were spoken and the rings placed, Caleb promising protection, Evelyn promising devotion, Lily promising with a solemn nod that she would take Caleb's last name. The moment sealed something deeper than marriage. It sealed a family, a real one, a chosen one, built not by blood, but by survival, love, and the kind of hope that refuses to die even when the world tries to crush it. Caleb signed the adoption papers next, his hand steady despite the shaking in his chest. Lily climbed into his lap afterward, arms thrown around his neck. "Daddy," she whispered into his shoulder. It was the first time she'd said it. The word hit him harder than any rifle butt ever had. He held her close, letting the weight of it settle into a place he thought long dead. They left Red Rock as the sun dipped low, painting the town in amber light. Evelyn rode behind Caleb, arms wrapped loosely around his waist. Lily rode her own small pony beside them, back straight, proud, secure. The journey home felt different, lighter, safer, as if the land itself recognized the shift. When the ranch finally crested into view, Evelyn rested her head against Caleb's shoulder. "It feels like we're returning to something," she said softly. "We are," he answered, "home." Over the next weeks, life reshaped itself. Caleb expanded the cabin, adding a second room, reinforcing the roof, carving a small window above Lily's bed so she could see the stars at night. Evelyn reopened her mother's old lesson books and began teaching local children inside the cabin, her laughter mixing with the scratch of chalk and the hum of the ranch. Lily thrived, running with the chickens, brushing the horses, helping Caleb with chores, her smiles no longer rare, but frequent and warm. The Hart family's appeal was dismissed within days. Word traveled fast. Grant Wycliffe's position collapsed under Judge Hardin's warning and the higher court's scrutiny. Once the threat dissolved, the ranch felt freer, safer, a place where life could finally grow again. One evening, as the sun bled orange across the horizon, Caleb stepped outside to watch his wife and daughter. Evelyn was teaching Lily how to braid rope, her patient voice rising above the rustle of sagebrush. Lily's giggles drifted toward him, soft and bright. Caleb leaned against the porch post, letting the scene wash over him. He had once believed he was meant to live alone, condemned by loss to a quiet, empty life. But the desert, harsh as it was, had handed him something precious. Two souls who needed him as much as he needed them. Saving them had saved him. Loving them had rebuilt him. Evelyn looked up, caught him watching, and smiled. A simple smile, but one filled with love, trust, and a promise that none of them would face life alone again. Caleb walked toward them, slipping an arm around Evelyn and lifting Lily into his other. The desert wind moved gently around them, warm and steady, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of new seasons. They were a family now, not made by chance, but forged through fire. And for the first time in a long time, the world did not feel empty. It felt full. It felt like theirs. Night settled slowly over the ranch, soft and blue, as if the sky itself were exhaling after a long, weary day. The cabin glowed with warm lamplight, spilling onto the porch where Caleb, Evelyn, and little Lily sat close together, wrapped in a quiet that felt like peace. The horses shifted lazily in the corral. The wind carried a low hum across the grass, and the whole desert seemed to breathe in rhythm with them. Calm, unhurried, safe. Caleb felt Lily's small head rest against his shoulder, felt Evelyn's fingers intertwine with his, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to simply be still. No threats on the horizon, no fear waiting at the door, only the steady comfort of belonging. Evelyn whispered something soft, almost a lullaby, and Lily drifted into sleep, held gently between them like a promise the world couldn't break. Caleb closed his eyes, letting the moment linger, letting it settle deep. Everything they had fought for, everything they had suffered, had led them here, to this quiet night and this fragile, beautiful peace. And as the stars slowly brightened above them, he whispered back, "We're home now, all of us." End of article. Good night.